3 weeks have passed since the 2026 FIFA World Cup kicked off. Millions of fans around the world have been captivated by spectacular goals, stunning upsets, and the race for the championship. But behind that vibrant atmosphere, another debate has been quietly gaining momentum. What makes this discussion particularly interesting is that its focus is not on a national team, a superstar, or a controversial refereeing decision. Instead, more and more players, coaches, and football experts are beginning to question the very changes that FIFA introduced for this year's World Cup. At first glance, these may seem like nothing more than isolated opinions expressed after individual matches. One coach complains that the game is being interrupted too often. A team captain argues that some of the new regulations are changing the way players approach the game. Meanwhile, several analysts believe football is gradually losing the rhythm that has always been one of its greatest attractions. But when similar opinions emerge from different national teams, across different groups, and from football cultures with completely different backgrounds, the story becomes much more than a few post-match complaints. So, what is really happening? Are players simply pushing back against a handful of new regulations? Or is this a sign that the relationship between FIFA and the people who actually create the game on the pitch is beginning to show signs of strain? To answer that question, we need to take a closer look at the changes FIFA introduced for the 2026 World Cup, the reasoning behind those decisions, and why they have sparked more debate than any World Cup in recent years. Before we get into the ongoing controversies, one thing needs to be made clear. Football has never been a sport that stands still. Over more than a century of development, FIFA and the International Football Association Board, IFAB, have repeatedly adjusted the laws of the game to adapt to the changing times. There was a time when teams constantly passed the ball back to the goalkeeper to waste time, until the rule banning goalkeepers from handling back passes from teammates was introduced. When VAR first appeared, many players, coaches, and fans believed the technology would ruin the emotion of football. Even the rule allowing 5 substitutions once faced plenty of mixed reactions before gradually being accepted. That shows that resistance to a new rule is not unusual. Every time football changes, 2 schools of thought always emerge. One side believes reform is necessary to make the game fairer, while the other fears that the sport's original identity will be affected. However, the 2026 World Cup has created a different picture. What has surprised many people is not one individual regulation, but the fact that a series of changes have been applied almost at the same time. It is precisely this overlap that has led many players and coaches to ask the question, is football being improved, or is it being changed faster than the people actually playing it can adapt? If each regulation is viewed separately, most of them have positive intentions. FIFA says these changes will make matches fairer, better protect players, and help referees make more accurate decisions. In theory, these are goals that are difficult to oppose. But what makes the 2026 World Cup different is not each individual rule, but the fact that too many changes have been introduced in the same tournament. From refereeing management, the scope of technological intervention, and the control of player behavior, to the rhythm of the match itself, almost every aspect has been adjusted, instead of adapting to just one new rule. As teams did in previous World Cups, national teams are being forced to get used to a completely different playing environment. That is also why the debates are no longer centered on the question of whether this rule is right or wrong, but have shifted into a much bigger issue. Can football change too much in too short a time, and still preserve the identity that has always made the beautiful game so compelling? First of all, it is important to make one thing clear. Most players and coaches are not opposed to football evolving. They understand that technology, sports medicine, and match officiating all need to improve to keep pace with the development of the game. What concerns them is not the introduction of new regulations, but the impact those changes have once they step onto the pitch. For a professional footballer, the game is about far more than running, passing, or finishing. Every decision is made in a split second, guided by instinct, rhythm, and the ability to read the flow of the match. Just a few interruptions or a moment spent waiting for a decision from the referee and technology can completely alter the rhythm that has been building over many minutes. There is also the psychological pressure. More and more players say they now have to think more carefully about every reaction, every gesture, and every challenge than they did before. Many worry that playing the game will gradually shift from instinct to caution, as every action can be examined from multiple camera angles. Perhaps that is why what concerns players most is not any single law of the game, but the feeling that they are having to adapt to a new playing environment, one where the natural flow of football is gradually giving way to tighter control. And that is exactly where the debates spreading throughout the 2026 World Cup begin. From FIFA's perspective, the changes introduced at the 2026 World Cup were not decisions made on a whim. The organization has repeatedly stated that its goal is to make football fairer, more transparent, and better suited to the pace of the modern game. For many years, FIFA has faced constant criticism over controversial refereeing decisions, time-wasting, unsporting behavior on the pitch, and inconsistent application of the laws of the game across different competitions. As a result, expanding the role of technology, standardizing the way matches are officiated, and introducing new regulations have been presented as solutions to reduce controversies that have persisted for years. From another perspective, football today is no longer just a sport. Every World Cup is a global event watched by billions of people, supported by hundreds of commercial partners, and accompanied by an enormous volume of data that must be managed. That reality requires FIFA to strike a balance between protecting the fairness of the game, ensuring a positive experience for spectators, and maintaining the smooth operation of the tournament. For that reason, the real question may not be whether FIFA has good intentions. The more important issue is whether the pace of these changes is moving beyond the ability of the people who actually create the game on the pitch to adapt. And that is precisely the point that many players, coaches, and fans continue to debate. Answering that question is far from simple, because every group involved in the 2026 World Cup sees these changes from a very different perspective. For FIFA, introducing the new regulations can help the tournament be managed more consistently, reduce the controversies that linger after each match, and increase transparency in important decisions. For referees, technology and more detailed guidelines also provide stronger support when making decisions in difficult situations, rather than relying entirely on what they can see from their position on the pitch, as they did in the past. Meanwhile, broadcasters and television partners benefit from a tournament with a higher level of organization, where every process is clearer and easier to follow. Fans watching from home also have access to more camera angles, more data, and more explanations for controversial decisions, something that was almost impossible just a few World Cups ago. However, from the other side of the debate, the players are the ones who have to adapt the most. They are not only facing their opponents on the pitch, but also adjusting to a new system of regulations and match management in every game. That is why the current debate is not simply about who is right or wrong. The real question is whether the benefits brought by technology and the new regulations are enough to justify sacrificing the freedom, rhythm, and identity that have made football so captivating for decades. In reality, very few coaches openly and directly oppose FIFA's decisions during the World Cup. That is not necessarily because they fully agree with them, but because every statement can create unnecessary pressure for the team or affect preparations for the next matches. Instead of offering direct criticism, many coaches choose a more cautious approach, focusing on the need for their teams to adapt rather than argue. However, by observing how national teams are playing, it is possible to notice small but significant changes. Many coaches have begun calculating more carefully when to push their team higher up the pitch, how to adjust the intensity of their pressing, and even how to manage their players' physical condition over the full 90 minutes. These decisions are not only shaped by the opponent, but also by the need to prepare for a playing environment with more new factors than before. That is also something coaches rarely say directly in press conferences. Every change in the laws of the game leads to a change in tactics. An adjustment that may seem very small can still affect months of research, analysis, and tactical planning for an entire national team. And when that happens at the same time as several different regulations, the pressure on the coaching staff is no longer just about learning new rules, but about helping players adapt while still preserving the identity and strengths that define the team. If players are the ones competing on the pitch, and coaches are the ones designing the tactics, then the fans are the ones who ultimately determine the life of football. Every change to the laws of the game will eventually be judged by one very simple question: is the match still exciting? In reality, the football community is divided into several different points of view. One group supports FIFA's changes because they believe technology and the new regulations reduce mistakes, protect players, and create a fairer game. For them, a correct decision, even if it takes a few extra minutes, is still better than an error that could change the outcome of an entire match. On the other hand, Many people believe football is gradually losing its natural rhythm. Long interruptions, situations that require lengthy reviews, and matches that are repeatedly stopped can break the emotional flow of the game. What made millions of people fall in love with football was its continuity, its spontaneity, and those unpredictable moments of pure excitement. Perhaps that is why today's debate is not simply about whether a particular rule is right or wrong. It has become a much bigger question. Do fans want a sport that is perfect in terms of accuracy, or one that still preserves the natural emotions that have made the World Cup so captivating for generations? In the past, whenever a new regulation was introduced, mixed reactions were almost inevitable. The rule banning goalkeepers from handling back passes from teammates was once considered too strict. VAR was heavily criticized for interrupting the flow of matches. Even goal line technology was met with skepticism before eventually becoming a familiar part of modern football. History shows that many reforms were ultimately accepted because they brought clear benefits to the game. But history also proves something else. Not every change succeeds the first time it is introduced. Some have required adjustments, some have been revised, and others have even been abandoned after revealing practical shortcomings. And perhaps the 2026 World Cup is now facing a very similar test. In reality, the 2026 World Cup is not only a race to find the world champion, it is also the first time FIFA has introduced so many important changes into a World Cup of this scale, turning the tournament into a test case for the future of football. If the new regulations prove effective, make matches fairer, reduce controversy, and still preserve the excitement of the game, they will very likely continue to be used in future World Cups, as well as many other international competitions. But if the problems that arise outweigh the benefits, FIFA will certainly have to listen to feedback from federations, coaches, players, and fans, then make adjustments. Perhaps that is why what will be decided after the 2026 World Cup is not only which national team will lift the golden trophy. More importantly, this tournament could become a milestone that shapes how football is operated for many years to come. What is happening today will not only affect the current World Cup, but also help write the next chapter in the history of the beautiful game. Above all, the debate surrounding the 2026 World Cup should not be seen as a confrontation between FIFA and the players. Both sides share the same objective: to help football continue to evolve. The difference lies in how they envision the future of the sport. Throughout the remaining weeks of the tournament, there will undoubtedly be more controversial moments, more decisions to analyze, and perhaps even further changes in the future. But only when the final whistle of the championship match has blown will we have enough evidence to judge whether these reforms have truly been successful or whether they still need further refinement. What do you think? Are FIFA's changes making football fairer and more modern, or are they unintentionally taking away the rhythm and emotion that have always made the World Cup so captivating? Share your thoughts in the comments, because it is these different perspectives that make this debate truly meaningful.